far reaches of the Appalachian wilderness. There are valleys so deep and twisted that even sunlight struggles to touch their floor. Locals call these places hollows of the damned. One such hollow belonged to the Kirklands, a name whispered with dread for over 2 centuries. But unlike other families who became notorious for violence or isolation, the Kirklands carried with them something darker, an inheritance of horror so grotesque that even the bravest mountaineers refused to tread near their land. It begins, as many stories do in Appalachia, with a family trying to survive. The Kirklands arrived from Scotland in the late 1700s, carving out a patch of farmland in the shadow of Devil's Backbone Ridge. They were quiet folk, keeping to themselves, but travelers noted an odd look in their eyes, pale, watery, with a glassy sheen, as if staring too long at something unseen. At first, neighbors attributed it to poor health, or the strain of back-breaking work. But when children began to vanish from nearby settlements, and livestock was found torn apart in ways no animal could have managed, suspicion grew. What the Kirklands were doing inside their hollow remained hidden for decades. The forest around their land became eerily silent, as if animals avoided it altogether. Trappers spoke of hearing guttural chanting at night, mixed with the faint screams of something or someone being cut apart. And those who wandered too close swore they saw shapes watching them from the tree line, tall, gaunt figures with mouths that didn't close properly, teeth too long and sharp for any human. By the mid-1800s, the Kirklands were no longer considered part of society. Their family tree had folded in on itself, generation after generation marrying only among kin. The result was deformities, twisted spines, faces with asymmetrical jaws, extra digits sprouting from hands. Yet even that was not the most hideous part of their lineage. Rumors spread of rituals, one said to grant longevity and unnatural strength, powered by the consumption of flesh, not animals, but human. It was a hunter named Elias Macready who brought the first proof. In 1847, Elias tracked a wounded deer into Kirkland Hollow. What he found instead froze him in place, a clearing littered with bones. Not animal bones, but human. Rib cages picked clean, skulls cracked open for marrow, femurs gnawed to splinters. At the center of it all was a massive pit, filled with ash and charred remains, still smoking from a fire that had burned through the night. Elias swore he saw a woman crouched near the pit, tearing at a roasted limb with her bare teeth. When she turned to look at him, her jaw stretched open, unnaturally wide, the skin splitting at the corners of her mouth. He fled, but his story spread quickly. Locals demanded the sheriff ride into the hollow and put an end to the Kirklands. A posse was formed, but only 3 men returned. They spoke little of what they saw, except to say that the Kirklands were not natural and that the hollow was cursed. From that day on, the area was abandoned. Maps omitted the hollow altogether, and trails leading near it grew over with brush. But the Kirklands did not die out. On the contrary, they thrived in their isolation, breeding generation after generation of malformed children, each more monstrous than the last. Whispers told of children born with translucent skin, their veins pulsing visibly beneath the surface. Others had jaws filled with double rows of teeth, or eyes that glowed faintly in the dark. They were hidden away deep in caves, only brought out for rituals that required their special gifts. By the 1920s, the Kirklands had become more legend than reality. Still, hikers and moonshiners, passing near Devil's Backbone Ridge, reported strange encounters. One bootlegger claimed he saw figures carrying lanterns through the woods at night, their shadows impossibly long, stretching far beyond the light's reach. Another told of stumbling upon an abandoned church in the woods, its pews filled with bones, its altar covered in dried blood. On the walls, carved into the rotting wood, were strange spirals, the same symbol repeated over and over, as if a language only the Kirklands understood. And then came the disappearances. Between 1931 and 1945, No fewer than 17 people vanished near the ridge. Most were travelers, drifters, tramps, men with no families to miss them. But a few were locals, including a boy named Caleb Turner. He had wandered too far while hunting rabbits and never returned. Search parties scoured the area, but found nothing except a single boot, its leather soaked in blood, lying in the creek that ran through Kirkland Hollow. When World War II ended, the government began surveying parts of Appalachia for new roads and development projects. Officials planned to cut a highway near Devil's Backbone Ridge. Locals warned them away, muttering about things best left alone, but surveyors pressed forward. Within weeks, the project stalled. 2 workers disappeared without a trace. Equipment was found, vandalized, wires ripped apart, engines clogged with meat and bone fragments. One crewman claimed he woke in the middle of the night to see a figure crouched at the edge of camp, pale, hairless, with its face split open into a grin that stretched ear to ear. The government quietly abandoned the project, and Kirkland Hollow slipped further into obscurity. But for those who lived nearby, the fear never went away. Strange howls were heard on moonless nights, low and guttural, echoing through the hills. Hunters continued to vanish, their rifles found snapped in half like twigs, and some swore that when the wind was right, they could hear chanting rising from the hollow, as if dozens of voices were calling out to something beneath the earth. The Kirklands, it seemed, were not merely an inbred family of cannibals. They were something more, something unholy. Generations of isolation and blood rituals had turned them into creatures that barely resembled humanity, and their secrets, the forbidden rites passed down from the first Kirklands, remained hidden in the caves beneath. Devil's Backbone, waiting for anyone foolish enough to stumble into their domain. But the most terrifying truth was this: the Kirklands didn't just hunt those who entered their hollow. They sometimes left it. The 1950s brought prosperity to many parts of Appalachia. Coal towns were booming, highways stretched farther into the mountains, and radios filled cabins with laughter and song. But while most families enjoyed the post-war years, those living near Devil's Backbone Ridge remained uneasy. For them, time had not softened the legend of the Kirklands. If anything, the stories had grown more disturbing. By then, 3 full generations had passed since the Kirklands were last seen, openly, yet their presence lingered like a sickness. Farmers lost livestock without explanation, entire pens of hogs stripped to the bone overnight. Families awoke to find claw marks on their doors, spirals etched into the wood as if with sharp stones. The sheriff of Rowan County, a man named Horace Dyer, tried to dismiss these reports as superstition. But in 1956, something happened that forced him to confront the hollow's truth. It began with a family named Whitaker. They lived less than 5 miles from Kirkland Hollow, in a small farmhouse passed down for generations. One evening in August, neighbors noticed the Whitaker home was eerily silent. No lantern light in the windows, no barking of their hounds. The next morning, a passerby discovered the front door hanging open. Inside, the house was in shambles. Chairs overturned, dishes shattered, blood smeared across the walls. Every member of the Whitaker family, father, mother, 3 children, was gone. Sheriff Dyer led a search party into the hollow. Despite protests from older locals who warned him against it, they combed the woods for 3 days, finding nothing but strange bone totems hanging from trees, bound together with strips of human hair. On the 4th day, they reached the creek that wound through the hollow. There, tangled in the roots of an oak tree, they found something that froze the blood of even the bravest deputy: the eldest Whitaker girl's dress. Shredded and soaked in blood, with teeth marks in the fabric, Dyer ordered the men back immediately, but some refused to leave. 2 young deputies pressed deeper into the hollow, certain they would find the missing family. They were never seen again. Dyer's official report claimed the Whitakers had been lost to the wilderness, their deaths unconfirmed. But locals knew better. The Kirklands had returned, From that point on, Kirkland Hollow became a place no one dared enter. Hunters skirted wide around it, trappers dismantled their lines, and even moonshiners, men fearless in most respects, refused to set up stills near its borders. But the Kirklands didn't stay contained. Travelers along back roads began to vanish, their cars found abandoned, doors flung open, belongings scattered across the asphalt. Some trucks were discovered still running, headlights cutting through empty woods. By the 1970s, the stories had become even more grotesque. Hitchhikers reported being stalked by figures in the forest. One man swore he saw a line of them standing silently on a ridge, watching him for hours without moving. Another survivor told of a woman who offered him shelter during a storm. Her cabin seemed normal enough, until he noticed the wallpaper was stitched together from tanned human skin. He fled in terror, claiming he heard her laughing behind him, her voice shrill and inhuman. In 1978, a group of college students decided to investigate the hollow. They were filming a documentary about Appalachian legends, and thought the Kirkland story would be the perfect climax. For weeks, they interviewed locals, collecting tales of the clan. Finally, they ventured into the hollow, with cameras rolling. Only one returned, a young woman named Denise Carver. Her footage was confiscated by authorities, but her account spread like wildfire. Denise claimed they found a massive underground chamber, a cave deep beneath the ridge. The walls were carved with spirals and crude drawings depicting figures bowing to something enormous, a shadow with too many arms and eyes. In the center of the chamber was an altar piled with bones, surrounded by dozens of them, twisted, malformed, their skin pale and stretched, mouths filled with jagged teeth. Denise swore some of them crawled along the ceiling like spiders, their limbs bending in impossible ways. The students were seized, dragged, screaming toward the altar. Denise only escaped because the ground gave way beneath her, plunging her into a stream that carried her miles away. When she surfaced, bloodied and broken, she staggered into a logging camp and told her story. The loggers contacted the sheriff, but when a search party entered the hollow days later, they found nothing. No bones, no altar, no Kirk, just an empty cave, silent and damp, as if mocking them. Denise spent the rest of her life in and out of institutions. In her journals, discovered after her death in 1993, she repeated the same warning. They are not human. They never were, and they will come again. That warning proved prophetic. By the late 1990s, disappearances near Devil's Backbone spiked once more. Hunters, campers, even a pair of state troopers went missing. In each case, search teams found only fragments, a badge here, a boot there, bones gnawed clean. Modern technology provided no safety. Cell phones lost signal in the hollow. Radios went silent, batteries drained as if the air itself consumed electricity. Drones sent into the area returned with corrupted footage, static and shadows moving unnaturally through the trees. And then, in 2001, a man named Aaron Kincaid stumbled into a ranger station, barefoot and covered in blood. He claimed he had been camping near the hollow when his group was attacked. According to Aaron, pale figures emerged from the trees in total silence, moving faster than any human should. They dragged his friends into the darkness. Aaron barely escaped, but not before seeing something that haunted him until his death. A figure sitting on a throne of bones, larger than the others, with eyes that glowed like coals. He called it the Bone King, and he swore it was the heart of the Kirkland bloodline, a patriarch so ancient and grotesque that he had become more monster than man. Aaron believed the Bone King was keeping the clan alive, using rituals passed down from the first Kirklands, rituals that required sacrifice, blood, and the constant devouring of flesh. The authorities dismissed Aaron's story as the ravings of a traumatized man, but locals took it seriously. For them, it confirmed what they had long feared. The Kirklands weren't just surviving, they were preparing, and their preparations, whispered the elders, were meant for something far worse than feeding themselves. They were waiting for the night when the Bone King would rise and lead them out of the hollow. The turn of the millennium should have buried the Kirklands as nothing more than Appalachian folklore. Modern life had no patience for stories of backwoods, cannibals, or Bone Kings ruling from shadows. Yet in Kirkland Hollow, the past was alive, and in 2010, the nightmare returned with a vengeance. It began with hunters again. Two brothers from Tennessee, Roy and Michael Tanner, had driven into Rowan County for deer season. They knew of the legends, but dismissed them as hillbilly ghost stories. On their second night, camped near Devil's Backbone Ridge, Roy awoke to a scratching sound outside the tent. Thinking it was raccoons, he unzipped the flap and shined his flashlight into the darkness. What he saw made him scream. Something crouched at the edge of the clearing, pale as snow, hairless, with limbs too long for its body. Its face was human, yet stretched, the jaw hanging loose like it had unhinged, and in its mouth were teeth layered like a shark's, dripping with saliva. Behind it, more shapes stirred, rising from the tree line. The brothers ran, abandoning their gear. Roy was never seen again. Michael staggered into a gas station at dawn, wild-eyed, covered in scratches. He claimed his brother had been pulled into the trees by shadows with mouths. His account spread across local news outlets, but was quickly dismissed. Officials labeled it a black bear attack, but those who knew the Hollow's history saw it as another piece of proof. The Kirklands were still out there. After the Tanner case, things escalated. Backpackers went missing. Hikers vanished without a trace. In 2014, a team of amateur urban explorers live-streamed their trip into Kirkland Hollow. Their broadcast cut out after an hour, the last image showing a figure crawling upside down along the beams of an abandoned cabin. None of them returned. The recording was pulled from the internet, but clips survive. Traded on dark forums. What frightened viewers most wasn't the figure itself. It was the sound behind the camera, dozens of voices chanting in a language no one could identify. Low, guttural, rhythmic. The same spiral symbol seen carved into old trees appeared in the cabin's walls, painted in blood. That chant would appear again. In 2018, a paranormal research group placed recording equipment near the ridge. Overnight, their devices picked up whispers, escalating into screams, then laughter. But layered beneath it all was that same chant. When experts analyzed the audio, they found frequencies outside the normal human range. Tones so deep they rattled the equipment itself. This led some to believe the Kirklands were not simply an inbred clan of cannibals, but something more. A cult, a bloodline devoted to worshipping an ancient presence, older than Appalachia itself. The Bone King was not merely their patriarch, he was their conduit to this otherworldly force. Local folklore ties this force to something called the Hollow, hunger. Elders speak of it as a spirit, others as a demon, born from the mountains themselves. It demanded flesh, blood, and loyalty. Those who fed it were rewarded with strength and unnatural life. Those who refused were devoured. According to legend, the first Kirkland made a pact with the Hollow hunger, offering his family's bloodline in eternal service. The deformities that plagued his descendants were not the result of isolation, but the mark of their covenant. They were being reshaped into vessels for something monstrous. By 2020, the legend had grown too strong to ignore. Independent journalists and thrill-seekers began documenting their trips near Devil's Backbone. Most returned with nothing more than eerie photographs of abandoned cabins and strange symbols carved into stone. But a few never came back at all. Their cars were found parked along gravel roads, doors open, belongings untouched, as if they had simply walked into the woods and vanished. The most chilling evidence emerged in 2021, when a drone operator sent his device into the hollow. For 10 minutes, the footage showed only forest. Then the drone's camera tilted, capturing a clearing. In the center was a throne of bones, exactly as Aaron Kincaid had described 20 years earlier. Surrounding it were dozens of pale figures, their heads snapping upward in unison to stare directly into the drone's lens. The feed cut abruptly. When the operator retrieved the drone, the memory card was gone. Since then, Kirkland Hollow has been under an unspoken quarantine. Locals refuse to speak of it. Police turn a blind eye to reports. And those who know the truth believe the Kirklands are preparing for something. Their rituals have grown bolder, their presence reaching farther beyond the hollow. Some even claim the Bone King himself has been seen, a towering figure with skin stretched like parchment, crowned with antlers, eyes burning red in the darkness. But perhaps the most terrifying truth is this. The Kirklands are no longer content with hiding. Whispers in the region tell of entire caravans of the clan moving under cover of night, spreading their spiral symbols on barns, bridges, and churches. Victims are no longer just drifters and hunters. Families have gone missing from their homes, entire households vanishing in silence, and every disappearance seems to pull the circle tighter. As though the Kirklands are closing in on the world outside their hollow. The Bone King waits. The hollow hunger stirs. And the Kirkland bloodline, hideous and unholy, is preparing to spill out of Appalachia and into the towns and cities that once dismissed them as legend, because in Appalachia, legends never die. They eat, they grow, and sometimes they come for you. R.D. The forbidden secrets of the Kirkland bloodline. But their story is only one of many buried deep in Appalachia. And trust me, the next one is even darker. If you think you're brave enough, hit that subscribe button and ring the bell, because what's coming will haunt you long after the video ends. Drop a comment below. Would you dare step one foot into Kirkland Hollow? Or would you run the other way? Remember, legends here don't fade. They wait, and sometimes they follow you home.